Hello, Mary Throne, is
Mary?
that you?
Yes, that's me. Sorry.
Okay, well, glad you could join us. Welcome. Well, let's go ahead. My name is Earl DeGroot, and I will be the moderator. And we thank you for joining our call, and we're happy to have you, the Democratic candidate for governor. And can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, we have a bunch of people on the call, and we wanted to do some quick introductions. And so that everybody doesn't speak up at once, let's do it this way. If you live in counties 1 through 5, please introduce yourself.
Larry Duranty up in Sheridan, Wyoming.
Okay. What organization are you with?
Well, I'm a member of the Backcountry Horsemen and a past chair.
Okay, great. Anybody else, 1 through 5?
This is Rob Joyce at the Sierra Club in Wyoming.
Jeff Muratori, Wyoming Backcountry Hunters and Anglers.
Shelly Palmer, Wyoming Interfaith Network in Laramie.
Anybody
Nate
else?
Nate Martin with Better Wyoming in Laramie.
Okay. If you live in counties 6 through 10, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, this is Warren Murphy from Wyoming Interfaith Network. Hello there, Mary.
This is Jesse Johnson with Wyoming Wildlife Federation in Lander.
This is Derek Farmer with Wyoming Hunter and Anglers Alliance.
This is Aaron Bannon with NOLS, the National Outdoor Leadership School.
Jeff Kessler with Wyoming Outdoor Council.
Okay, if you live in counties 11 through 15, please introduce yourself.
Jenny with Greater Yellowstone Coalition.
Okay, if you live in counties 16 through 23, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Mary. This is Leah Zemeznik with the Jackson Hole Conservation Alliance.
Okay, anybody else?
Hey, Earl, sorry, this is Shannon Anderson with Powder River Basin Resource Council.
Anybody else? Well, welcome everyone, and Steph Kessler from the Wyoming Outdoor Council is going to tell us a little bit about the history of the Keep It Public Coalition.
Hi, Mary. The Keep It Public Coalition, we're just a broad and diverse, loosely knit association of groups, individuals, and businesses. We share the common value of support for our public lands. We're comprised of over 40 NGOs and thousands of individuals and businesses. We were formed approximately 2 years ago to oppose the transfer of federal lands to the state. We launched the group by holding a giant rally in November in Casper 2016 with about 400 people showing up. And since then, we've held about 4 other events or rallies across Wyoming in different communities. We have semi-regular phone calls to stay in touch, and we mostly work on state legislative issues.
All right. Thank you, Steph. We have a number of questions, and the first question is from Jesse Johnson with the Wyoming Wildlife Federation.
Yes. Hi, Mary. Thank you again for being on this call. This one's fairly straightforward. It's got just a couple sort of parts to it. The first part being, what is your position on federal land transfer? And then the sort of nuances of that is, do you support small, pilot project type transfers? And do you support the transfer of federal land mineral management to the state?
Was that the whole question?
Yes.
So I don't support any transfer of federal lands to state management. I also don't really support the pilot project concept. I think the existing process we have for, when there are land swaps that are beneficial to everybody, and I'm not that familiar with those, so I don't want to misspeak, but I think you know what I'm talking about. And I'm not talking about pilot projects where we sort of experiment to see if the state should manage the lands, because I don't think we should. And and I don't think we want to do the mineral management either. I do have frustration with, and not everybody might agree with me on this, but over the years the NEPA process I think has encroached on state DEQ regulation, and people who've known me since the 90s know that that's not a new view of mine. But that's different than, I think the Wyoming agencies should continue to regulate the things that the Wyoming agencies regulate: the air, the water, the oil and gas, etc. And that the federal land managers should be federal land managers, including the mineral management. I don't know what it would cost us to do that, but I'm guessing it would be expensive. So
I would assume so as well. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, the next question is from Nate Martin with Better Wyoming.
Thanks, Earl, and thanks, Mary. What role do you see public lands playing in diversifying Wyoming's economy beyond mineral extraction in the next 20 years?
Well, I think, as I've traveled the state, obviously I grew up here. I've traveled the whole state before, but, not to the same degree that I've been doing for the last year. And, in particular, I think there are a lot of outdoor recreation opportunities that would involve our public lands that we need to encourage and promote and develop beyond the usual suspects. More mountain biking around Worland, more rock climbing in Tensleep, taking advantage of recreational opportunities in the Bighorn National recreation area. More in the Red Desert. We're going to continue to have oil and gas development, and I think the next governor is just going to have to stand up for Wyoming's interests, because maybe the last administration, and people on this call might not agree with it, but the perception in Wyoming is the last administration was too anti-development, but I already see this administration as being too pro-energy development. And, Wyoming is going to have to stand up for our way of life and what's important to us.
Thanks.
So I guess the answer is it plays a huge part in diversifying the economy going forward.
Okay, thank you, Nate, for that question. The next question is from Shannon Anderson with the Powder Basin Resource Council.
Hi, Mary, and that actually transitions well to my question, which is, what do you view as the role of the Wyoming governor in terms of weighing in on federal oil and gas leasing and other federal issues impacting public lands and minerals?
I'm sorry, I missed the end of that question, Shannon. What was it?
Yeah, so basically, what do you view the role of the governor is on weighing in with our federal partners?
So, again, I think it's the governor's role to stand up for Wyoming's broad interests, and also, just making sure we have the expertise at the state level to assist the local governments. It's tricky because not everybody obviously agrees, but making sure that all the stakeholder interests in Wyoming are at the table and are represented. Certainly the county commissioners in the small western counties, that are surrounded by public lands, want to make sure they have a seat at the table, but they might not have the resources to make that happen. But also, I think all stakeholders should be involved, and, the governor can facilitate that, and the governor has to listen to all stakeholders.
Okay, thank you, Shannon, for that question. The next question is from Warren Murphy with the Wyoming Interfaith Network. Warren, are you on the line?
Sure am. Okay. Ready to go. Well, Mary, this question's about the Red Desert. Red Desert, as you know, is an important scenic and recreational landscape for all kinds of things, for guides, outfitters, hunters, hikers, and other recreational activities, as well as culturally, spiritually, and historically significant for Wyoming's tribes, both Arapaho and Shoshone, and also the faith community and our nation's western expansion area. So I guess the question is, do you support and how much or less oil and gas drilling in the landscape, including the wilderness study areas which are under consideration?
I missed part of it. I'm sorry, Warren. I missed the end of that.
Yeah.
Did you say something about the wilderness study areas?
Yeah. Do you support oil and gas drilling in this landscape, including the wilderness study areas?
Well, I need to get more familiar with the specifics in that landscape. I don't think I support the oil and gas drilling in the wilderness study areas. I'm a little confused by what the Sweetwater County Commissioners are doing. Did they throw in the towel on the WPLI process? But I think we have to. I'm going to probably be a little wishy-washy, to be perfectly honest. But I think we have to protect the iconic landscapes of the Red Desert, and certainly would be very skeptical of drilling in the wilderness study areas, or maybe oppose it. Well, you couldn't do it now anyway. They'd have to not be wilderness study areas anymore. So I need to look more into the specifics of that, but I think in general we have to be very careful about what we do in the Red Desert because it does have iconic landscapes and recreational opportunities. And there are ways and places to drill now without affecting what needs to be preserved for future generations, and also the whole wildlife corridor issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is from Jeff Murator with the Wyoming Backcountry Hunters and Anglers.
Hi, Mary. Thanks for being here. Mine's a two-part question. And first, what would be your position or ideas on improving public recreation access to landlocked federal lands and landlocked state lands? And as the governor, you would be the president of the Board of Land Commissioners, and would you consider entertaining a rule change to allow limited use on cultivated state lands which are currently off limits to hunting and fishing?
Cultivated as in farm?
Cultivated as in, harvested crop type lands. Currently, the only recreational use not allowed on those lands is hunting and fishing.
I'm going to have to look at that. I've never looked at that issue, but I think if it's not damaging to the crops, it seems like, we could be flexible. In terms of the access issue, one thing that I have always supported and that I would support increased funding is to the Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund. And then maybe looking, I'm a little unclear on how much it can be used for access issues now, either, purchasing easements or land, or whether we would have to tweak it a little bit, but I think that would be an appropriate use of that fund. But we need to get that fund corpus up to $250 million, which is what Dave Freudenthal always wanted, so that it can generate more income for various projects across the state.
Jeff, do you have a follow-up question on that?
No, that's good. Thank you, Mary.
All right. The sixth question is from Derek Farmer with the Wyoming Hunters and Anglers Alliance. Go ahead, Derek.
Thanks, Earl, and thanks, Mary, for being with us. As you may know, public land use is critical to hunters and anglers throughout the state. And we are very concerned when parcels are sold or transferred that are used for our sports or for an access point to other public lands that we utilize. The question I have is this: during the sale, purchase, or transfer of state lands, should the value of recreation on that land and adjacent lands be considered?
To maximize income for the schools, but we should also, in the process of going through a sale, consider, some way to maintain access, even reserving an easement or something, to get to public land, which I assume could be negotiated.
Okay, I have a follow-up question on that. As the chairman of the State Land Board, would you be willing to make policy changes to the State Land Board that would ensure that these considerations are taken into account?
Yeah, I'd have to look at their existing policies, and which I'm not as familiar with them as I hopefully will be in 4 months, 3 months. But certainly, if there are policy changes that can be made, I'm certainly willing to look into them. I don't know how much is policy and how much is rule. I'm more familiar on the statutory side.
Thank you.
Okay. The next question is from Larry Durante with the Wyoming Backcountry Horsemen. Larry, are you on the line?
I am.
Good.
Okay. Mary, this kind of is a follow-up to one of the earlier questions. There are several million acres of public lands, state, BLM, Forest Service lands in our state that are not currently accessible by the general public without the adjacent landowner's permission. Would you support the creation of a public access program in Wyoming, possibly similar to that Access Yes program that the Game and Fish Department has, that allows voluntary monetary contributions into the program, but this program would be dedicated to purchasing permanent access and easements from willing private property owners. These would allow permanent public access to our public lands. And if you do support that, what would you do to start this program?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds, I'm not familiar with that program, so certainly it sounds like a good program to me. Anytime, we can use incentives or do things in a voluntary way, then we avoid the whole argument about private property rights, which is usually what happens when these kinds of things come up, certainly in the legislature. So I'd have to look at maybe consulting with Game and Fish and understanding how to get a program like that started. I mean, do you think it would require a law change, or that the governor or the Game and Fish or someone already has the discretion to do that? I'm just not clear on the mechanics of it all, but it sounds like a good idea.
No, if you've got the money, and it's Larry, if you've got the money available and you've got a willing seller of access, I mean, there's no law that needs to be created. It's just the fund that needs to be created and start the process.
Yeah, so we would just have to find the money. But I think, given the importance that we place on having this kind of recreation available, and also keeping Wyoming an attractive place.
Yeah, you would let
regular people.
Yeah, well, individuals could donate if they wanted to. When they buy a hunt and fishing license, or just buy some kind of stamp or something to donate into that program. Is that something you would support?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm between. I think I'm in good cell phone coverage now. I was between Glen Rock and Douglas, and so I was occasionally missing words here and there, but I should be good for a while now.
Okay. Thank you, Larry, for that question. The next question is from Jenny DeSaro with the Greater Yellowstone Coalition.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you. My first question, and I might have a follow-up, is what are your thoughts, Mary, about collaborative teams or task forces to address Wyoming's natural resource challenges?
Collaborative in terms of state, federal, or energy, environmental, or...
Yeah, collaborative meaning people working together from a variety of stakeholders to create the best possible outcome for all parties.
Oh, I think that's, the way we should always do it. The sage grouse implementation team is, I think, an example that's worked and, brought people together to work on an issue and prevent a problem, prevent a listing, which would have made everybody's life difficult. I'd like to look for more opportunities like that. I also met with, and I'm sorry, I can't remember what they're calling themselves, but I met with Scott Zimmerman with the Farm Bureau and John Goldstein and Dwayne Meadows, and, I was really intrigued by those three coming together with a unified agenda on conservation issues and habitat protection. So anything I could do as governor to facilitate that kind of cooperation, I'd certainly be willing to do.
So, Mary, in my follow-up, will you commit to appointing conservation organizations to collaborative teams?
Yes. I think, and I didn't always have success in trying to persuade my clients to do this, but, there's the formal public comment process for everything, and then there's the informal process, and I always think it's better to do more outreach and addressing issues up front by bringing people together than to wait till you have the formal process that then turns into a fight and litigation. That's just not cost effective.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Aaron Bannon with the National Outdoor Leadership School. Aaron?
Thanks, Earl, and thank you, Mary, for taking time to speak with us. So my question is in relation to a decision the DEQ made in 2016 to downgrade about 83,000 miles of small streams across Wyoming from primary recreation contact to secondary recreation contact. What this did is for them it put off management until the impurities of the stream, the fecal coliform, etc., reached a much higher threshold. And so my question is, would your administration be willing to take a second look at this downgrade, affirm the value of clean water for the state, and possibly help us reverse this burden of truth which has been shifted onto private recreation users? Big question.
That's a loaded question.
I apologize for that.
But I think I would have to do a little research on that before I gave you a firm answer. I'm generally familiar with that, but I just was that 2016. I wasn't following that closely. I think I have heard concerns about this issue before, but is that and I know I'm an environmental attorney, I should remember this stuff, but I think I do mostly air and less water. So was that part of the triennial, was that part of the regular review process? So are you asking that we not wait till whenever the next review is supposed to happen?
Yeah, interestingly, the triannual review process is happening right now, and Knowles, for example, did submit comments on that. One of the things we pointed out was that when the DEQ did their categorical downgrade, they missed at least 62 trailheads that we use, and they weren't willing to look at that at once. They were asking for us to do a stream-by-stream nomination process. So when I talk about shifting the burden of proof, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. So could we incorporate your concerns into the triennial review?
We would like to, but the DEQ has indicated that they're not willing to.
Oh, okay.
Unless, see.
Can I park that question and not misspeak and maybe get back to you?
I think that's fair. Yeah, I'd be happy to follow up with you and your team.
Okay. I think that's better than me not being careful, if you don't mind.
Sure. It's not a game of gotcha. But would like to get this on your radar screen for sure.
I've been hanging out with reporters a lot, so never mind.
Well, thank you, Aaron. The next question is from Steph Kessler with the Wyoming Outdoor Council. I think she has a question relating to migration corridors.
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Earl, and thank you, Mary, for being on this call. And mine is the last formal question. There can be a variety of threats to big game migration corridors, including subdivisions, wind farms, and oil and gas development. Are you familiar with the recent 2017 research regarding the long-term impacts of oil and gas development to mule deer migration?
Somewhat familiar. I can't say that I've read the stories. I haven't read the research, would be my honest answer.
Well, I have a follow-up to that. The Wyoming Game and Fish Department recently stated in the last Game and Fish Commission meeting that it is their desire that no drilling infrastructure be located in the Red Desert to Hoback mule deer migration corridor. Do you support this goal?
Yes, I want to make sure that I have a Game and Fish Commission that is committed to wildlife and has enough expertise to make good decisions. And I think governors get into trouble when they don't rely on the people they appoint. So, yeah, I haven't heard any pushback to that, but I assume there will be. When did they was that a recent decision?
Well, frankly, the debate is not so much about the goal, but what we need to do to achieve that goal.
Right.
And there is a lot of debate regarding that in terms of certainty and what's going to be effective.
So, what would it take to achieve the goal? Is it, more resources, or restricting drilling, I assume, and other? There's really not a concern about residential development in that corridor, is there? Or are some parts going to be subject to residential development?
I know some of the residential development aspects are more in the northern part And I think a number of private efforts through easements and have attempted to address some of that. But there's been a lot of recent federal oil and gas leasing in the southern part of that corridor. And,
right.
and that's what the debate is about. And the difference is that the Game and Fish Department is proposing just a lease notice, whereas I think everybody else is saying we need a stipulation on those leases to have strong legal standing.
Oh, yeah, something enforceable in the leases is what you're saying?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. I hate to keep punting, but a little research on that too. I mean, like I said, I'm following some of these things at kind of a higher level than I should be, and I feel uncomfortable getting too specific. So I would just maybe do a little research and get back to you. But I mean, I tend to agree that if something's not enforceable in some way, just saying, based on principle, we're going to do this is, that's really not much protection.
Well, thank you, Steph, for that question. I think we might have enough time for one unscripted question. Does anybody have another question?
I would have a follow-up, if no one else does, about bonding requirements for oil and gas development.
Okay, who are we speaking to?
This is Larry.
All right.
Back on yours. Mary, do you believe the current bonding requirements for oil and gas development, do you believe they're adequate? And if so, why? Or if you don't think they're adequate, what would you do to raise these limits?
We just redid the bonding requirements 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I think they have to constantly be reviewed to make sure they're adequate, and that the Oil and Gas Commission has to have enough flexibility to impose adequate bonding requirements. I think most of the people on the call know that I'm currently practicing in an oil and gas firm, so I kind of come at this from a broad perspective, but I'm also a landowner. So yeah. I like the idea of everybody being protected.
Yeah, all these up here in the Powder River Basin, all these abandoned wells, and now the public's on the hook, and the state of Wyoming's on the hook to do the environmental cleanup and close them down.
Yeah, and actually, hopefully, I would also want the state to look at what remedies as well as the landowners. There's some case law out there that gives people more ability to go after, like say if the and I don't know if this would apply to the state, but certainly landowners can pursue remedies against the original company if because there was a good state Supreme Court case a couple of years ago, well more than a couple of years ago, that basically when the big players were doing coal bed methane, they couldn't just get rid of their obligation to the surface owners by selling the assets to a smaller company that couldn't basically, meet its obligations. So I think we should look at state remedies like that too.
Well, thank you, Larry, for that question. Mary, as you can see, we're a diverse group committed to keeping public lands in public hands. And if you're elected governor, we look forward to working with you. Do you have any closing remarks?
No, I really appreciate everybody taking the time to be on the call. We're, working, 12, 14 hours a day, crisscrossing the state and, trying to get my message out. I think, what people need to know about me is I'm trying to let people know when I don't agree with them on something. I do my best to be straightforward, and there are people on the call that where we've been on the opposite side on issues from time to time. But I don't think you should ever doubt my commitment to public lands. And one advantage I bring as a Democrat, of course, is that my party platform does not say anything about, well, it opposes transfer of state lands to, or federal lands to state control. And, you know, that's still an important plank in the Republican platform, that elements of that party are going to continue to push on that issue. And I think in order to be more secure, I think it would be helpful on the public lands issue to have a governor who's independent of that platform. I mean, totally independent of the platform. So maybe we can bury that issue once and for all and just get back to dealing with all the other public lands issues that are so important to all of us enjoying our public lands and enjoying the resources they provide.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for attending this call, and especially thank you, Mary Throne. And if you're elected, we look forward to working with you.
Thank you. I'm going to work really hard to try and get elected.
I'm sure you are. Many hours.
We have a debate Thursday night. I think we've had a debate already on Channel 5 in Cheyenne, but Thursdays will be more statewide. It'll be on public radio and then also broadcast later on PBS. So I'd encourage everybody to watch.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and have a good day.
You too. Thanks, Earl, for arranging the call.
You bet.